Yeah.
How exciting. In town?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're in Madison, Wisconsin, but we have FaceTime.
Right.
Right now she's trying to learn how to crawl so she can get to the phone and eat it.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good to see you. Welcome to Isaac and Michelle.
It's Michelle without the R. Okay.
Oh, is there an R on there?
Yes.
Oh, Michelle. Anyway, glad you guys are joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are really delving into the Besht, the Baal Shem Tov. One thing that I'm not sure if I emphasized enough. One more, just tiny bit, like 2 minutes of the historical part. We actually, one of the interesting questions about the Baal Shem Tov is how much of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov are actually from the Baal Shem Tov. And the reason I say that is because, as I said last time, the Besht did not write anything. And the book, what we have from him is from his two earliest students, Yaakov Yosef of Polon and the Maggid of Mezrich, Dov Ber. If you remember, Dov Ber is the one we kind of read that origin story last time of the he went to test out the Besht and to see if he was really all that. And the Baal Shem Tov had him read this book of Kabbalah and explain it. and then the Baal Shem Tov says, no, you're teaching it wrong because you're not teaching it with your whole neshama. So anyway, that's Dov Ber. But what's really interesting is that, as is so often the case, the men who pass down the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, like you don't just take water into a vessel and then pour the water into the next vessel. It becomes transformed. And so sometimes one of the questions for historians that we're not going to spend too much time on because it's not relevant to us and it's not all that interesting to me, but it's just at least important to name, is when we look at the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, are we really looking at the teachings of Dov Ber, and are we really looking at the teachings of his other students? Because they really systematized his thought, and so very often when we say, in the worldview of the Baal Shem Tov, really what we're saying is in the worldview expressed by Dov Ber or Yaakov Yosef, based on their being inspired by the Baal Shem Tov. And so it just becomes an interesting question. Who is the Baal Shem Tov? But for our purposes, when I refer to a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, we're not going to open up that conundrum every time. We're just going to talk about the school of the Baal Shem Tov, and frankly, whether the Baal Shem Tov was responsible for all of the teachings that emerge in his name, or whether those were created by his students, that'll just remain for us an unknowable mystery. What is clear, and then we'll transition. What is clear, if you really boil it down, you say what was undoubtedly an innovation of the Baal Shem Tov, where there's no doubt that the teaching is from him. I'm not sure it could be a single teaching, but it's more about an attitude, it seems to me, or a sort of revolution of the religious spirit and a revolution of the Kabbalah. So rather than any particular teaching, it's about how the Baal Shem Tov expressed a yearning and an ability to satisfy that yearning through a certain approach to the texts. And he viewed the text of the Kabbalah as being very, very personal. And he believed that the Kabbalah could be used, so to speak, by the individual to really deepen their own self-understanding and to apply, if you would like, the Kabbalah to the religious life of the individual. Now, so if you don't have any clue what I'm talking about, just think back to the book after which this class series is named, Sha'arei Ora, The Gates of Light by Chikatilia in the 13th century. You can think back to any number of the chapters we read, and he doesn't talk about the prayer life of the individual, right? If you can think back, he talks about concepts in the Kabbalah, magnificent concepts that have profound implications, but he doesn't talk about the experience of the individual. Nor did the Ari, the Yitzhak Luria, who came 3 centuries later. Nor did the Zohar talk about personal individual experience. Here and there, there's sort of allusions, but the best is, as we could see from today's reading, the Baal Shem Tov is really the one who begins to articulate the Kabbalah in a way that allows a person to apply it to their religious life, and who insists that anybody can cleave to God with the right approach and the right framework. And so that's really, more than any specific teaching about what he said about this verse or that verse, those are really kind of the background assumptions, I would say, that the Baal Shem Tov brought to religious life that created this revolution. We still, I think I said last time, we really live in the world that the Baal Shem Tov created. So he was just one of the giants of the religious life, whether or not we can put our finger on precisely what he taught. So I wanted to start with that. And let me pause and just see if there are any questions about anything I just said.
Hey, Brian,
briefly before we. Wow, 3 questions. Anne, Brad, and then I think I heard Cliff's voice, but I'm not sure.
Hey, I'm working on recruiting a guy to be a broker. You've talked to him, Brian, the other Brian. Do you know he's a professional guitar player?
Cliff?
Yeah, he's a musician.
Hold on.
Really fascinating. So when you.
Okay. Anne Pro.
I might be remembering it wrong because I wasn't taking careful notes, but when Natan was teaching his class about Poland, about the Jews in Eastern Europe, it was during COVID a couple months ago. He talked about the Besht introducing the idea that everybody could achieve connection with God, that
Right.
It was not the domain of just the most learned people. And that was something that the Orthodoxy, well, it wasn't called Orthodoxy then, but that they reacted against. So is that two things so one is prayer, or is that all one thing, that through prayer anybody could?
Yeah, no, I think they are distinct, but yeah, no, I think that it's related. That he felt like this was accessible to people, right? It wasn't just people in deep meditation and leading an ascetic lifestyle and studying Kabbalistic texts all the time who had the ability to comprehend, but that the average person could actually cleave to God, through teachings of properly understood teachings. So, yeah, so that's another very powerful and important implication of that. Now, I think we talked about last time, one of the challenges of that view is that it can lead one to think that Hasidism is all about the spirit and not about the mind. But all of the Hasidic masters assumed they assume that everyone is learning Mishnah and Gemara and the traditional texts. Their model ideal Yid is not somebody who is like a wood chopper. I mean, there are stories. There are stories that, like, yes, the wood chopper out there who sings to God with a full heart, is at a higher level than you, who's just been sitting in the yeshiva all day and you don't have any soul in your, there are those teachings, but really those kind of, those are not to be understood too literally, right? The ideal is someone who's doing deep learning and is combining that with kavanot, with inspirations that will allow you to cleave to God. But yes, he did for sure believe and encourage Jews to set out to cleave to God, even if they were unlearned.
And the individual prayer
practices
are then the path toward getting that.
Yes, I mean both Torah study and prayer, but for sure prayer, as we're going to really explore in the next few weeks, prayer absolutely was central to the best. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody else had a hand. Oh, Brad had a hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure that can you hear me? I'm not sure that I understand what you went into at first. Are you saying that these things, they don't inform us, or they don't attempt to inform us about how it applies to our personal life? Is that what you were saying?
No. No, sorry. I was saying that that the Baal Shem Tov emphasized how the Kabbalah affects our personal religious lives in a way that had not been done previously. Like the Kabbalah previously was really much more about God and the different cosmic forces, divine forces in the world, and understanding them and seeing how we could affect them. It really focused on God. And the Baal Shem Tov sort of looks at it through the other end of the telescope. How do all these Kabbalistic teachings affect our daily lives? Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I thought you were going to say that, because it seems to me like I can't connect, not that it's necessarily at this point that I need to, but how does it gel with Torah?
Right. Well, that's a good. You mean, how does it gel with Torah in terms of mitzvah?
How does it intersect? How does this inform our Torah study? Maybe I should say it that way.
Right. Well, we'll see as we continue to learn.
Kind of the same question as Anne had, I guess. Anyway,
I guess so. Well, I mean, you'll. It's a great question, and let's just say it's too big to answer briefly, and allow the class and the texts of the Baal Shem Tov that we encounter slowly sort of answer what you're saying, because it's actually a very important question you're asking, and I don't think there's a short answer to it. Okay. But we could see the world through the Torah. We could see ourselves through the Torah for the Baal Shem Tov. That the Torah, and this is not an idea that's original to him, but he finds a new way of talking about it, that the Torah really is the blueprint of creation, and that therefore the entire created world is also the Torah. And so our understanding of what Torah is just broadened wildly in a way that both changes how we relate to the world and also how we relate to the Sefer Torah. And that may sound totally obscure, but just hang in there, and I think the answer will unfold as we go.
You're seeing Torah through a different lens this way.
I would say that's true.
Fair
Yeah.
enough?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, I realize, yes, Brad, I think that's a good kind of heading to put on it, and then we'll kind of put more meat on the bones of that answer. I realized I forgot to address the second part of what Anne said, and that is that yes, one of the things that about the how widely it should be studied. One of the things that I learned growing up, just like just one of those truisms that's not true that I just sort of heard, was that when Hasidism emerged, that the reason it was so controversial was that these guys were all mystics, and that the normative Jewish community, who had control of the institutions and the governing bodies of the Jewish world in Europe, that they didn't want Kabbalah, that they thought that was too weird. That's completely false. It's completely false. So the Vilna Gaon, and I believe, I don't remember if this is in the little introduction of this book, or if it's in something else I was reading, but the Vilna Gaon, who was really the first opponent of Hasidism, was a deeply learned Kabbalist. Like by that, by the time of the Besht, as we already talked about the fact that the Kabbalah had become already widespread in terms of the elites. And it was, part of, if you were going to be a learned Jew in Europe in that time, it meant that you knew all the classical texts, Mishnah, Gemara, Midrash, etc., and also that you studied Kabbalah. So it was not a disagreement about whether Kabbalah should be part of Jewish life. It was a disagreement about how Kabbalah should be talked about and who should get to learn it. Okay? So let me ask, you will not be graded on your answer to this. How many people currently have this book in front of them? And how many people have it on the way? Okay. I feel like you should be in one of those two categories. Either you should own this book, and for those of you who did not come to the class last time, that you have no way of knowing this. Either you should own the book, or it should be on the way to you owning it. It's just going to make so much more sense if you have this. So let me begin by offering an apology that I did not scan these texts that we're going to be using. They're in English. I didn't scan them because I was sort of hoping more people would have the book, but it's okay. So next time I will try to scan some pages that we're going to look at. But I really want to encourage you to buy this. And if you need financial help ordering the book, just let me know. I have a discretionary fund. I have a book fund, and make sure everybody who wants this book can have it. Okay, so what we're going to do, and as Lenny pointed out, the opening introduction in here is actually a very, very useful way to get a good picture of what's up with the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, but let's jump in. So the first thing is, there's a very famous epistle or a letter that he sent that the Baal Shem Tov sent to his brother-in-law, who was living in Israel. And this epistle, this is a very, very important work of the Baal Shem Tov, because it relates, there's something prophetic a little bit about it, but it also gives a sense of how the Baal Shem Tov and his students thought about what he was doing in the world, thought about the scope of his work and how important it was. So did anybody have enough recollection of that epistle to sort of take a crack at summarizing what it said? Well, in the letter, let me just see this. Okay, so I'm just reading from the English, which I know this is not the best way to do this, but just listen. So,
could you give us the page, please? The page?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So if you have the book, see, Mickey just got a little star because now I know Mickey has the book. I'm reading from page 3 of Pillar of Prayer, page 3. Okay, So I'm at like the third line down, and he says, so again, this is the Baal Shem Tov to his brother-in-law. At the time that you are praying or studying, and with each word, whatever emerges from your mouth, be in the state of intention so as to unify the divine name. To unify the divine name. We're going to come back to what that means in a moment. This is a hugely important concept, unifying the divine name. For each and every letter of meaning of a word contains within it three aspects. Okay. One is he says the olam, the outer world. It's so confusing. People come in and out of the class, they disappear, they come back. Anyway, so every single word, okay, so every single word of the Torah and of the tefillah, of the prayer, he says, contains three aspects. The outer world, someone's got to mute themselves, even though that sounded so cool. Okay, so the outer world, the realm of the soul, and the divine realm. Don't worry, we're going to go back over and decode this. These letters of the words and these different levels rise up and unite with each other. When these letters unite and bound together, they form a word whereby true unifications take place within divinity. Participate in this process by uniting your soul with them. Okay, so he's saying to his brother-in-law, participate in this process of seeing the three levels of each letter, of each word, by uniting your soul with them within each of these aspects. Thereby, all the worlds are united as one, and they rise up, causing great bliss and limitless pleasure. Okay? And then he gives an analogy, and then we'll pause and go back. This may be understood by analogy to the felicity of a groom and a bride in their limited physical manifestation of joy, all the more so when union occurs on such an exalted level. Okay, so he likens, oh, Ann Prawl, what are you doing? Oh, you're putting the text up there, thank you.
Yeah, I'm using my
yeah, that's smart. So he, so a couple of things about this. So he says that the first thing I want you to notice is just sort of implicit in the letter, which is he's giving practical spiritual advice to his brother. But the advice is not just like, yeah, do all these, do all the mitzvot and study your Talmud and, don't, be a mensch. It's not that kind of advice. It's advice that is going to give his brother-in-law a particular spiritual experience. And in that way, the Baal Shem Tov is demonstrating what we've talked about already, which is that in some ways the praying or learning person is the object of the Baal Shem Tov's concerns, right? He wants to transform the experience of the Jew. So, and then he says, be in the state of intention. Okay, so have kavanah, and this is really important to know because for the rabbis of the Talmud, kavanah has a very, very wide range of meanings, right? So when they say study a text or pray with kavanah, we sort of think of it a little bit more like the Baal Shem Tov thought of it, because we are, as I said, we live in the world that the Baal Shem Tov created. But in the Talmud, it wasn't exactly clear that kavanah had to do with this like feeling of spirituality or whatever we say it is. Kavanah also just had a very, like, for example, when we say you're supposed to pray the words of the Shema with Kavanah. Has anybody heard that? Like, so there's tons of prayers in the Siddur. And believe it or not, we're not required in order to, we ought to have, it would be ideal to have Kavanah for all of them. But in terms of the halakha, in terms of Jewish law, we're only required to have Kavanah for the Shema and its paragraphs. Now, for the Gemara, one of the meanings of that is simply don't space out when you're reading them. Like, because you get to learn these, probably almost all of us could say the V'ahavta by heart. So it's easy, you can say the V'ahavta as you're like tying your shoes and paying no attention. But Kavanah also just means say each word clearly. Don't like blur the words together. But for the Baal Shem Tov, it had a very different meaning. For the Baal Shem Tov, Kavanah was essentially closing the gap between you and God, so that you can see into the inner meaning of the words and of the Torah that you're learning, or the words of the prayer that you're learning, so that you really tap into something that's beyond the surface level and draws your inner experience as the prayer together with God. And that idea is in itself so essential to what the Baal Shem Tov is teaching, because implicit in that is this idea that when we're walking through the world normally, or when we're praying normally, if we're not really thinking about doing it in the right way, we're just reading words on a page. For the Baal Shem Tov, that was not even prayer. For the Baal Shem Tov, unless you were really focusing on opening up what the words contained, even beyond their literal meaning, and trying to focus on like the divine cosmic energy, so to speak, that was contained within each word, and allowing yourself therefore to connect with God, you're not really praying. And we're going to talk more about the implications of that very profound idea. But does that make, let me pause here. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You hear me?
Yes.
Questions, comments? Okay. So, okay, so he says that, and he says that when you do this, you're allowing, let me see how he says this. When you do this, when you pray with Kavanah and you're aware of these three levels, the three levels rise up and unite with each other. When they unite, they form a word. So what does that really mean? Well, if I am, let's just say I'm praying without Kavanah. I'm praying without Kavanah. What does that really mean? It means that I'm sitting in a room and I'm reading a book. There's me, there's the words in the book, and then there's this concept of God that is just like abstract. When I pray with Kavanah and I allow the words to sort of dissolve and for me to kind of negate my own ego, right? So I sort of dissolve the concept that I'm the reader of the text, and I feel like the text is speaking to me in a way because I know that it's connected to God and it's opening up my ability to relate to God. Then suddenly these three distinct worlds these three distinct levels become unified. And that's what he means by raising up the letters of the words, so that we dissolve the gap between God, the book, and the reader. Okay? I know that's a huge concept, so only pause there. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, raise your hand and don't be embarrassed. Myra Siegel, what do you got? You're muted. Oh, you're just waving?
You asked to raise your hand, so I was emoting. I don't quite get it.
Oh, no, right. No, I said, if you don't understand it, raise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I misunderstood.
All good. Okay. And now that idea is going to come up again and again and again and again. So I'm belaboring this letter, not because the letter in itself is so important, but because this idea is going to come through in so much of his writing. Cheryl.
It seems to me we have here an example of a teaching that is in the best stone words, which is kind of exciting to hear about. And I'm wondering if there are other letters like this that we know about.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. There are many, one of the main sources of knowledge about the Besht, I shouldn't say knowledge, one of the other sources of teaching about the Besht is a collection called Shivchei HaBesht, Praises of the Baal Shem Tov, which are stories about him. And the reason I say it's not really knowledge, it's just sort of like, you know, more sources of teaching, because it's not clear that it's a historical work. But in any event, I don't know if there are other letters we have. It's a good question. Okay, now, oh, sorry, Liz, and then I'm going to move to the next teaching.
I just didn't understand what the difference between the soul and the divine realm was. Why is there that distinction?
Great question. Anybody else want to answer that? Well, the individual contains a piece, so to speak, of the divine, right? Every one of us has a spark of the divine. What does that really mean? That our neshama, the kind of upper part of our soul, is actually part of the divine. But like right now, my neshama is within me, so to speak. It's part of my, it's the highest part of my consciousness. It's part of me, but it's also part of God. And so, yeah, I guess that's the simplest answer. The neshama.
So the difference between the divine realm and the soul is what?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the soul, I mean, this is a weird way to say it, but the soul can be understood, the highest level of the soul, of the person's soul, the neshama, can be understood as that part of God that is within each person.
Right. It animates us, is the way I see that.
It animates us, but it connects to God, because there are levels of the soul within the person. The lowest level is the nefesh, right, which is really the part of your soul that I would say animates you, that like connects between your body and your mind. But at the higher level is the neshama. There's a part of you that is really like purely divine that's within you.
Okay.
But the neshama is what we call it when it's within the person. But because I can access that doesn't mean that I don't contain the whole universe within me, right? So God is God, but there's part of God within me that's the neshama, right?
Right.
That's
I'm sorry. The olam, 3 aspects: olam, soul, divine realm. What is the divine realm?
Right. The divine realm, I would just say, is God's true essence, godliness that's in the world. God is
the whole godliness.
The whole thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Not within the individual, but just the whole divine realm, the source of everything. Right. And so the goal is to come close to that. And by doing that, collapsing those 3 differences. Okay. Lenny.
Well, I'll just make it quick. Rabbi Nachman often talks about field of souls. And so the divine realm is kind of a nebulous concept, because we don't look at some kind of absolutist heaven like Christians do, someplace where you go. So it is an open question for me. But
yeah, fair enough. Right. But we know that for whatever it may mean, it's not. This is just to give a practical answer to Liz. Josh Rose does not contain the entire divine realm within me. Right. I have a neshama, but the divine realm is the wholeness of the source of all of the universe. That's like living and breathing, this whole dynamic everythingness. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to say about this letter is that this is now I'm actually going backwards, reading on page 2. And the Baal Shem Tov says that he encountered the Messiah. I'm in the middle of page 2. He encountered the Messiah. And he said to him, "When will the master arrive?" So he says to the Messiah, the master refers here to the Messiah, and he's saying, "When will you arrive?" Like, all the Jews all over the world are like waiting for you. When will you arrive? And he says, the Messiah says to him in this vision or a dream, "By this you will know, when your teachings," meaning your teachings, the Baal Shem Tov, Israel Baal Shem Tov, "when your teachings will be well publicized and revealed in the world, and your wellspring shall be spread abroad, the teachings that I have already taught you and that you have comprehended, so that they too will be able to enact unifications, that means bringing the soul together with God. Then the obscurations that will have come to an end, and the time of divine favor and salvation will be upon us. So just the short version is what you have to remember there is that two things. One is that when it says the world of obfuscations will come to an end, we live in a world of concealments, right? Because in the world of concealments, like right now, there's you and there's me, there's Zoom and there's all the distinct parts of everything, but that's concealing that within all of it is God. Okay, so that's why he talks about the world of concealments, and this is a concept that is clearly drawn from Kabbalah, right? We talked about at Ein Sof, and for those who haven't studied the Kabbalah, it's okay, but this is just a bonus for those who have. The Ein Sof, like the purest expression of divinity, is represented by light, and Malchut, the realm of Malchut, which is the God as manifested in the physical world, is characterized by darkness, because the divine light is obscured by physicality and by ego. And so in this world of obfuscations, we don't see divinity. But the Messiah says to the Baal Shem Tov, that will come to an end when your teachings spread throughout the world. In other words, when you, Baal Shem Tov, when you convey to the whole world through the publication of books and whatever, your teachings, people will no longer perceive the obfuscations. They'll see right through them. They'll see that you are not you and I am not me, but we're all part of God, right? That people will be granted this perfect spiritual vision in messianic times where they'll be able to see absolute divine unity in everything. And that's going to happen when the Baal Shem Tov's teachings spread. Okay, so you can understand immediately why Hasidism became so fervent, such an unbelievably powerful movement. Because it wasn't just like, oh, wow, these books are fun. Like, this makes me feel spiritual. They believed that this movement was spreading the key to true understanding throughout the world. We're going to allow people, once they have the keys to understanding, everybody will be able to see through the illusions of separation and multiplicity, and will be able to perceive God's unity holding everything together. Okay? So, and that becomes important for a number of reasons, not only for the Baal Shem Tov, but also as a way of understanding the importance of the tzaddik, of the righteous person in Hasidic writings. The tzaddik is the Rebbe, like the great, for want of a better term, guru around which different Hasidic schools formed. Because the Rebbe was not just a teacher, teaching you how to study Torah and helping you out with your problems. Like, the rabbi was the person who was unveiling a veiled world. Okay, so I wanted to convey those two important concepts to you. Brad, quick question.
Yeah. Are you saying that this man in the 13th century was?
No, the Baal Shem Tov is the 17th, 18th century.
Anyway, someone here was speaking with God.
The Baal Shem Tov relates that he spoke with the Messiah. Okay. That's what the Baal Shem Tov claims in this letter.
Right.
The Baal Shem Tov claims in this letter that the Mashiach spoke with him, and that the Mashiach told him that I will come to the earth and redeem everybody once your teachings have spread.
Exactly. Well, that's a pretty big deal.
That's a big claim. I'm not talking about its veracity. I'm just saying that he had that vision.
I'm not either. I'm not questioning. I'm not questioning.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No.
Veracity.
Okay.
But it just is huge.
No, I'm glad you pointed that out. Right. It's an enormous claim, right? It's a huge claim. Okay. Now let's go to page 4,
I just
which is really the beginning.
And what what follows from that
Yeah.
is that what we're doing here right now, studying Baal Shem Tov and Chassidut, we're bringing Messiah as we do this.
Exactly. Right. That's
Unification. Isn't that
right.
it?
Now, just to, to complicate that a little bit, the short answer is yes. Would the Baal Shem Tov look at this circle of people who are not learned and who are not, who are not all kosher and not all observing 613 and say, yeah, these guys are bringing the Messiah? I don't know. But yes, the first answer, just the simple answer is yes. This is exactly what Mashiach told him. Your teachings are going to spread, and once they do, then people will see through illusion. Okay, now, in some ways, this is an absurd thing to say, but in some ways, our class is actually starting right now, because now, everything we've done up to this point, I showed you snippets of text last time to give you a sense of the worldview of the Baal Shem Tov. Then we talked about the history, and we talked about the epistle, and now we're actually diving into Amud HaTefillah. So the pillar of prayer, which is what this is called. So in the Torah commentary, I said this last time, I'll say it really briefly. In the Torah commentary that has the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, it goes through parsha by parsha, and it has these different teachings in the name of the Baal Shem Tov gathered together for each Torah portion. Okay, so you get to Bereshit, and it goes through all of Bereshit, and there's different teachings of these in the name of the Baal Shem Tov from his different students, all cobbled together. And then you get to Parshat Noach, which was last Shabbos's Torah reading. And Parshat Noach starts out in the same way. There's teachings about different verses of that Torah portion. And then suddenly you get into this huge discussion. It's a huge tangent, and it becomes a kind of self-standing work. And that's what this book is. So in a sense, this is actually taken out of Parshat Noach of the Baal Shem Tov and published as a separate document, because he uses Parshat Noach as a way to begin to talk about prayer. Okay, so I'm reading on page 4. So actually, sorry, here, let me do this because I want to share something with you. So we're just going to look at the verse of the Torah that he leaps off from to start Amud HaTefillah, 6:16. Whoops. Okay, so we're in Genesis 6:16. Okay, so we're in the few verses into Parshat Noach. And will somebody read this for me? Verse 16. Sarah Sturtz.
Make an opening for daylight in the ark and terminate it within a cubit of the top. Put the entrance to the ark in its side. Make it with bottom, second, and third decks.
Okay, so it seems like a straightforward verse. God is beginning to teach Noah how to make the ark, right? It's just like, this is the instruction manual. Sohar ta'aseh lateva. That sohar is an opening for light. Make for the ark, the teva. Ve'el ama techalena, and complete it from within a cubit of the top. A cubit, by the way, is like essentially the arm's length from elbow to wrist. That's what a cubit is. Put the entrance to the ark on the side, make it bottom, second, and third decks. Okay, it's just an instruction. That's all. The Baal Shem Tov, remember that the Baal Shem Tov is interested in dissolving boundaries. And so those, and seeing the wholeness that's with any individual piece of the universe. So if you look at a word as an individual piece of the universe, and then you open it up and you see that it contains so much more than it appears to. right? And this, we know this very well from the Jewish interpretive tradition, but especially from the world of Kabbalah, where a verse that seemed to mean one thing, when it's properly understood according to the Kabbalists, it has nothing to do with that thing at all. Okay, so the Baal Shem Tov says, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov explained, make an opening for the ark, or in this book it's printed as make a window for the ark. The word teva does not just mean ark, it means word. Okay, the word teva means word, not just ark. Okay, that one utters in, so make a window for the ark, so that the word that one utters in Torah study or prayer be illuminated. For each and every letter of a word contains within it aspects of the outer world, of realm of the soul, and of the divine realm. Okay, so let's, okay. Who wants to, will somebody take a shot at just putting in your own words what the Besh is talking about? What is his advice to us? Like, can you describe practically what he's saying we should do?
Okay.
Liz?
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump in there.
Okay.
Can you put the words back on the screen again? Can you put the English back on the screen again?
Yeah.
So the teva is the ark. It's also like the vessel of the human being. Okay, and make an.
Well, no. I mean, it may be that, but let's just stick to his teaching. He says teva means word. It means word.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping with that. Okay, so if you're making an opening for light in your word, and
yep.
Okay, well then.
Well, so let me can I? So let me just explain it. So what he's saying is, oh, sorry, Robbie, do you have a hand up?
I think it's saying that every word is an opening to God.
Right. Beautiful. Right. Exactly. So every word can, and he's not just talking about like words when you're at the shopkeepers and you're buying like a side of salmon, right? He says specifically when one utters in words that one utters in Torah study or in prayer. Okay, so he's talking about words in a particular context when you're turning your mind to God. See those words and open within them and a window, so to speak, so that the word itself starts to let in the sunshine, so to speak, of the larger picture of God in the world, right? So allow the word to be informed by its largest possible meaning, like the meaning of God in the universe. And that when you're praying the words, have the opening to do that. So have the open-heartedness and the open mind to do that. So for example, I mean, really, you could think of any prayer or any part of the Amidah, any part of the Shema, any part of anything. And he says any one of those words has the ability to connect you with the divine. Like, don't just limit it to its literal meaning. See within it the capacity that is speaking of the one, and allow yourself to absorb that energy. So open a window into the word. Okay, so he's reading us totally against the Peshat. It's also worth noting that well, let me ask you this: why did he choose Parshat Noach to begin this meditation on prayer, which again, we've only started and it'll become a little less obscure as we go on. Why Noach? Why is it? I mean, you could say, well, he could have done it in any portion and he just randomly chose Noah. But in terms of what is happening on the Peshat, on the basic literary level of the Torah, why does this teaching about being given the true way to understand prayer, to connect you to God, why is that relevant to Parshat Noach, Michael?
Well, if you just look at the time, yeah, if you just look at the timing of it, I mean, it's like, if you look at that like pivotal point, that could also be the pivotal point, like in my life, that maybe up until now, I've done the things that humankind was doing up until the flood that kept me from, that led to my own, for that type of terminology, to, to wickedness or whatever, the things that kept me from being connected with God. And then you've got that pivotal moment where you've got the ark, and you've got that opening and the new.
Okay, great. So it could be an allusion to a person operating in a world that has been overcome with evil, and this is a way out of that. Robbie?
I think, well, because God, destroyed the world, and then he vowed never to do it again. And so if he vowed never to do it again, there's got to be some way to open up communication so that we can somehow do a better job here than what we did up until the point. So I think it's right. It was a question that something different has to happen, and what is that difference? And I think the idea of prayer or the start of communication with God, it could possibly be. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
No. I think there's something there. I think, I think that is. I think there's something very powerful in what you're saying. I think that it's a way of saying. What I would add to what you guys both said is that I think that there's also an implication that, like, look, the world is constantly on the edge of ruin, of being dissolved, of everything being destroyed, right? Not literally by the flood, because God said God would not flood the world again. But in this world that is overcome with evil so often, God is giving us a way out of that. How is it going to be different? As Robbie said, this time, God's giving us a way out of that, and it's through proper understanding of texts in our prayers. That's what will open up a window into the words, so that we can see God's presence around us when we're praying, and see the world properly. So we open up a window into our words, and therefore into our world. Let me keep reading, and then we'll pause. Okay. Okay. So then so before we were focusing on the word teva, which means word, but now he's going to explain window, which is sohar, or here it's translated as opening. This book translated as window, same thing, sohar. He says sohar, window, so that the word emerges with clarity, causing pleasure to the Creator. One needs great faith to practice this. For the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is called, this is where things take a different turn, the faith of the craftsman. And without faith, one is, God forbid, or heaven forfend, a murmurer who causes dissension between the master and the household. We're not going to talk so much about that Zohar quote, but he says that to do this requires emunah, requires faith. And what's so fascinating, I want you to really pay attention to this, because I think that this is actually so profound, is that for the Baal Shem Tov, emunah, or faith, is not just believing that God exists in the world, or believing in some with some abstract conception about God's qualities. Emunah, faith, is really the ability to see the potential for every word in your learning and your prayer to connect you with God. To say that through my, and he doesn't use this word, but I'm going to use it, through my imaginative capacity, I am going to allow this prayer that seems to be about the splitting of the sea, or seems to be about God's love, to stand in for everything, the unity of the world. I'm going to allow every word to open up the possibility that I can cleave to God, and that I'm going to have faith. I'm going to have faith that these words really will make that possible. If I relate to them in the right way, they'll transcend their specific meaning, and they'll allow me to feel and to sense God. Okay? And that's what faith is. So it becomes a kind of faith that involves the believer a little more, because it's a faith in the ability of my experience of the texts to connect me to God. Does that make sense? If not, let me know, because I don't want to build on something that's on a weak foundation. Okay. If I don't see any raised hands, then I'm going to keep going. Okay. So
Robbie's hand.
I'm going to keep reading. Oh, sorry. Whose hand?
Robbie.
Robbie?
I think that the difference is that this kind of faith means that we have a much bigger role than what one normally thinks of faith.
Right.
That's all I wanted to add.
No, that's exactly right. That's right. It's not just having a proper conception of God. It's like the agency of reading a text and being willing to dissolve yourself in it, and to see every word as a way of connecting you with the divine radiance in the world. That's right. That hinges on us, which is then, we're not going to go into it, but for those who are interested in circling back to the paragraph I just read, that's how he's using that passage from the Zohar, that it becomes about the faith of the craftsman. The word craftsman is omein, which has the same letters as the word emunah. Okay? So the Zohar is playing with that distinction. So we become the craftsman, and being a craftsman of words, so to speak, or of wordly interpretation, is emunah, right? It's the same word in Hebrew. Okay.
Rabbi.
And then he goes, yes, sir, Harvey.
Question.
And then Sarah starts, yeah.
Okay. So the object of studying and prayer is to unify with God, right? Or to be part of that God. So what would prevent me then, instead of studying and delving into all these texts, of simply having a mantra and saying it over and over again?
Yeah.
And in that way relating to the universe and God.
It is such a great question. I think that is such an important question. And let me say this. I don't have an answer that I feel totally great about, but I actually do believe that I think that one of the reasons that there was such anxiety about the proliferation of Kabbalah, with its intense focus on creativity of readings, so much anxiety about teaching people Kabbalah before they had demonstrated their commitment to living Jewish life day in, day out. I believe that the root of Kabbalah that works its way through Hasidism necessarily brings one at some point to that question. And I think the rabbis were worried that people would conclude, well, I don't need this whole mitzvah system. I can just, if this is all true, I can just like walk out into the forest and sing a song and like open my heart and cling to God. And all we can say is that was not, it's an excellent question. It was just not addressed by the Hasidim, because they didn't, or the Kabbalists, because they didn't, they were so deeply into Jewish life that they They just didn't see that problem. It was just an assumption that you were living mitzvot and you were studying texts all the time. So this is a question of how do we now give life to that? It's a really, really important question, I think, for contemporary Jewish spirituality.
Thank you.
And by the way, I mean, Sarah Sturtz, go ahead.
Can you go back to sharing your screen for a second? So the word Zohar, is it Zohar or Tzohar?
No. This word Zohar is not the same as the word Zohar.
It's interesting though, because Zohar means brilliance or light.
Yeah, or radiance. Yeah.
Radiance.
It's entirely possible that if you go back far enough in the Hebrew language, that the words are related. Like you do sometimes see that with a certain switching of a letter, they become different words, but they share some root. I don't know if that's the case here, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're related words.
Okay.
But Zohar is, as in the book, or brilliance or radiance, is Zion Hey Resh.
So over here,
good question.
What part of speech is Zohar?
This is a noun. So it's really, if you were going to translate it literally, it would be a window you shall make for the ark.
Thank you. I just couldn't see where the sentence came from.
Yeah, no, it's a little confusing.
So from this,
okay.
Get programmed from the train.
Say it again.
So from this, we get the Yiddish jokes about throwing grandma from the train a kiss.
I guess so. It could be. Okay, so let's keep going. And then he says, he keeps going. So now we're still talking about what do you do when you're praying, when you're studying Torah. And he quotes this passage, terminate it within a cubit of the top. Okay, and the word for cubit is amma, aleph, mem, hey. And he says this, finish it, he's quoting the Torah, finish it or terminate it 1 cubit from the top. And he says, this refers to incorporation in one's practice of the divine attribute, ima, or understanding. Okay, so he says, don't let this word amma mean cubit. This does not mean cubit. Now he's saying this refers to ima, which means mother, right? And ima in the Kabbalah is associated with the sphere of bina, which means understanding. Okay, so let me just keep reading. It'll start to make a little more sense. This comes to teach us that as soon as the word emerges from your mouth, do not dwell on it, but move on. Do not look on high, just as one ought not gaze directly at the sun. This is the meaning of finish it from the top. Okay, so he's offering 2 different interpretations here, and I don't want to dwell on them because I think the implicit message here is more important than the substance. But I do want to just briefly say, so terminate it within 1 ima of the top. In other words, allow the divine realm of understanding to be what informs you about the meaning of the word. Like open yourself not just to your own narrowly constructed definition of what each word of the prayer means, but allow ima, allow bina, allow divine higher understanding to inform your experience. You're trying to cleave to bina through your prayer, to the highest level of cosmic understanding or divine understanding. And I guess, so to move off of the substance, do you see that he is doing what he is doing what he is telling you should do, right? He's taking this he's taking this Torah verse, which seems to be talking about how to build a boat, and he is using that and blowing up each word so it refers to something totally different. And he's saying that's what you need to do in your prayer. Don't just allow the words to work on the sentence level. Allow them, have the faith that when you read a prayer or study a verse, that it's connecting you to understanding God's unity and experiencing God's unity. So do you see how he's modeling for you in his teaching what he's telling you to do? Does that make sense? Yes, some maybe. Okay. So one of the things that he'll get to eventually, but I actually think that this is very, very important. So I'm gonna I'm gonna just spend a moment on this. So remember that when he's talking about the three levels, as we read in the epistle, and then we just read at the beginning of this, that the first level was the world, okay, the olam. So now we can't avoid a little bit of Kabbalah here. I don't want to get too theoretical in this class, but the word first of all, you need to know that the word olam, ayin lamed mem. Does anybody know what other valence that root has besides world? It's really, really fascinating.
Forever. Is it forever?
Okay, great. That's one of them. That's one of them. It's not the one I was looking for, but yeah, that's great. It does mean that. Ayin lamed mem actually means concealed or hidden. Elam, same spelling or same root, but it has this other valence of hidden, which is fascinating because we look at the world, the olam around us, and we see it as a world of where we're seeing things, right? I'm looking over here and I see a gallon jug of water. I'm looking at my screen and I see what's really there, which is your faces. But actually, the olam is related to what's concealed. So what is really concealed in the olam? What would a Kabbalist say is concealed?
Divinity.
That's not a rhetorical question.
Divinity.
Yeah, right. God's unity, God's divinity and unity and oneness is concealed in the world. It's there, you just don't see it. And so that's one thing to know. But the other thing is, and here's where I'm going to get a little Kabbalistic. In Kabbalah, and we didn't really talk about this so much in the Gates of Light class, but for the Kabbalists, and this is for sure something that the Baal Shem Tov is drawing on, for the Kabbalists, Malchut, that is the lower world, right? The kind of most, the physical world where we are, that has where God is most concealed as opposed to revealed, was referred to by the Kabbalists as the world of speech. The world of speech. And the way to connect this to the Sfirot is, if you imagine, if you analogize God's different levels. So like at the highest level, you have the divine will. Like Keter is God's will. So the will to, like, for example, the will to say something, it starts with a desire to say something, and then it moves into the concept of like, okay, I'm going to describe something, and then all of this is internal. It's all in the mind. When it actually manifests physically, it's through a word, as I'm speaking now. And so the rabbis use that analogy to talk about Malchut being the world of speech, okay, where words that were once ideas manifest in the world. And so for sure, the Baal Shem Tov is playing with this idea that when you have a word, that is analogous to the olam, to the world, because it's the manifest reality. But if you open it up, if you sort of, tear it apart, so to speak, to reveal what's within it, it points to something higher in the divine mind. So every word, just like everything within the world of Malchut, like an apple, if you could put on your perfect spiritual glasses and look at the apple or look at another person or a tree, you would see the divine essence within it. In the same way, the Baal Shem Tov is saying every word contains that possibility. Every word of prayer and Torah study, if you see the word, for example, the word sohar, window, it actually contains everything else within it, if you understand it correctly, because at the root of it is the divine mind. Okay, you see what I'm trying to explain here?
Wow, that's pretty intense.
And what that, yeah, it is pretty intense. Brad, go ahead.
I'm digressing a little bit. I guess I want to ask a personal question. Hey, do you think, in your experience, that you have been in that place, that you've experienced that?
Experienced what?
What you just described, of using a word and in it seeing the divine, or as you used also, the comparison between looking at other things in the real world.
Right. So I'm really glad you asked that, because what I want to spend the rest of the time. I actually want to do one more little teaching from this, and then I want to talk about what does this look like for us? What does this look like for us? How do we apply this? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna hold off on answering that because I just want to read one other little bit, and then let's just talk about how would we make sense of this. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So now let's look at, one second here. Okay. He says at the very, very last sentence on page 4, actually, will somebody else read that? Somebody who has the book, obviously, read the sentence that begins on the last line of page 4 and continues on page 5. Read it for us.
One needs to hear within oneself each word as it is being spoken, for the Shekhinah becomes manifest as the enactment of the world of speech, and the speaker is the one who conveys the divine presence through the world of speech.
Essentially, just he's adding something to what I just said. So I said the world of speech is Malchut, the physical world. And what he's adding to that is that the way in which the individual becomes a vehicle for God through speaking, right? Because if the world of speech is the world of Malchut, so then the people who live in the world of Malchut, you and me, when we speak, we are being like the vessels for God's Shekhinah in the world. And so he says, the Shekhinah becomes manifest as the enactment of the world of speech, and the speaker is the one who conveys the divine presence. So when I'm speaking words of prayer, like I'm in the Amidah, and I'm saying the Amidah, I'm literally bringing the Shekhinah, I'm allowing the Shekhinah to come into the world through my speech. Okay, and so I think the Baal Shem Tov wants you to see, look, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know if he would say it like this, but if you are reading the prayer literally and you're focusing on, well, gosh, in the Ahava Rabbah, it says that God loves us. Gee, can God really love? Is God, like, love seems like a thing that people do. Is God a being that can love? Maimonides says God doesn't change. So how can God love or not love? You know, if you start to go through those, like you're really trying to nail down the specific theology of the prayer, the Baal Shem Tov says, no. You're on the wrong frequency. Forget the literal meaning of the prayer. and understand that every word you say that comes from the Torah or from the Siddur, every word is bringing the divine into the world. Okay? Now, just to back up one step, the reason that this works so well in prayer is because in prayer, we are attempting, forget whether or not you've actually accomplished this, but in prayer, we're attempting to reflect on God. So the prayer, right? And the prayer contains God, right? At the level of the physical, right? When we are speaking in prayer, we are unifying God and God's name, because God's name is down in this realm. And as we meditate on God and we say these words, we're allowing God to come together with God, right? If you look at the individual person as being the lower level of the divine, so here I'm drawing heavily on Kabbalah, when we use words as a way to perceive God's greatness in the world, or God's unity in the world, we're making God and God's name one. We are becoming the unifiers. Okay? If you don't understand, you got to raise your hand or wave your arms. Okay. So I'm now going to read the next part. How will one be able to practice this? As the verse continues, you, Noah, and your entire household must enter the Teva, the ark. The way the Baal Shem Tov understands that is enter into the word with your entire body and energy. Every word you pray, you should have your whole self invested in it, right? Allow this yearning that you have to be close to God, this yearning that you have to see through the world of illusion, this yearning that you have to not feel broken, this yearning that you have to be fulfilled and whole. All of it should be in every word that you pray. You should bring that yearning. You put your whole family, so to speak, your whole being into every word that you pray. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov wants us to be able to do. So what does this mean for us practically? So Brad, to answer your question, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for me. And specifically I think what it comes down to is emunah, is faith. And here's how I mean that. So the way that the Baal Shem Tov taught, yeah, I get it would be a lot easier if it weren't, but it necessarily has to be because of the way God made the world. The world that we live in is the world of concealment, and so it's necessarily a struggle. Right? The whole object is to move from the world of concealment to the world of revelation. So we start with a problem already. So yeah, it is necessarily hard, but the faith that the Baal Shem Tov talks about is a problem for me, is a challenge for me, because in my case, I don't know how every other person relates to it, but in my case, it's hard for me to believe. I mean that literally. It is a challenge for me to believe. It is difficult for me to believe that any word that I'm interpreting, in a wide open way, is that I've latched onto a legitimate meaning, as opposed to a meaning that I want it to have. So if I'm reading the prayer and my mind is just going like this, and I'm reaching up to this level where I really am just feeling God around me through the words, there's part of me that says, well, that's just you, Josh. That's just you and your imagination, and you want this to mean something, and so it means that. Or you're claiming it means that, but
maybe you're overthinking it.
Well,
that's what it sounds like to me.
This would not be the first time.
But then everything is everywhere you go with that is a trap.
Right, but look at the danger of the other side, right? So I mean, I don't disagree with you. You are correct. But the reason these thoughts come up is because when we pray, we want we want it to be something true and real. We don't want it to be a product of our imagination, right? I mean, I can imagine unicorns coming down and prancing around me and throwing lollipops at me. That's nice too, but that doesn't mean it's real. So I think that we have this struggle within us where in Hasidism, where the question of imagination and whether imagination represents a deeper reality or whether imagination represents the fantasies of the individual ego becomes a very pressing question. So I posted on Facebook the other day this incredible lecture about this is a parenthetical, but I will try to find it and share it with the class, by this woman who's a professor, I think at Hebrew U. She's and now I'm forgetting her name, Rachel Leora, I think.
Yes.
And yeah. And so she talks about Kabbalah as a work of imagination. And I won't go into that here, but it's quite fascinating. Her claim is that the Kabbalists were just freely using their imagination. It seems like implicit in her argument is you shouldn't spend too much time trying to decode the Kabbalistic systems because they're mostly works of imagination rather than some like roadmap to the secret spiritual DNA of the universe. But what came out of that for me was that imagination is central to the project of the Kabbalists and to the Hasidim. And so that emunah that he's talking about is so important. The emunah in the reality of what we're doing when we pray. And I think that what I would say, the reason when I'm able to overcome those doubts, the reason that I am is the Kabbalistic teaching that each of us is in fact an expression of the divine, right? That this is just the world that we see around us is just a more obscured aspect of the divine reality that we're all part of. And so the yearning for unification, the desire to transcend myself and to connect with my maker, that's very, very real. And that therefore, when I do that in prayer, that's real, right? So what I think, Brad, what I would say is there are moments for me where prayer does work at that level. I can't claim that it usually does. For me, it's not so much, and I would love to talk about the best with this. It's not so much because a particular word sent me in a direction. Rather, it's the rhythm and the pattern of the words that allow me, that essentially turn into a form of meditation for me.
Yeah.
So that
And
my
now
mind...
we can enter the world or the aspect of song in this place as well. Right?
Oh yeah, also, yeah, I think that's right.
Joel? For me, I find sometimes I've found a way to not have any angst in this process. All of a sudden, the anxiety of what we've been talking about, if you know what I mean, is kind of melts away. And when that anxiety leaves, right. Then beautiful. Then something opens up because personal angst will really put a hitch in your get along, so to speak.
Right. No, very, very well said. Thank you. Joel?
I'm not sure how to follow the hitch in your whatever, but good analogy.
I don't know.
So one or two things, but before I say that, that Rachel Elior, that Jewish mysticism, I don't know if you'd be open to having some sort of special mini class. I think anybody who shared in that Gates of Light would find it pretty interesting because it's almost kind of challenges you as if like, why are we even bothering with the whole Kabbalah? I mean, because it's a function of such despair of people for centuries having nothing to cling to that they created this.
Right. Yeah. What bearing does it have on our own lives? Yeah.
But in going to these conversations, and I think I've shared with you before my issues with prayer, probably the least part of Judaism that I kind of cling to, because I just have a hard time with the words. So I was interested in this whole thing and the fact that don't believe what you're reading, don't take it literally. So one question would be, well, we have God knows how much prayer that we say every single day. Why are we saying the prayers? I mean, some of these people were Kabbalists. Some prayers were just written by some rabbi that I don't know. Like, why doesn't he preach the idea of our prayers should be reading the Torah every day? Because that's supposedly at least the word of God. So maybe there's a better way to understand those words. I'm not sure why we should kind of cling to prayer if we're not looking at it literally. And if they weren't written by people who are Kabbalists, you know, why?
Well, first of all, so just to that last thing you just said, of course, he believes that the prayers were definitely written by Kabbalists, right? I mean, he believes that
all the prayers.
Yeah, because that's how the Kabbalistic and Hasidic self-understanding is that the Kabbalah is as old as the Torah, right? It was taught with the Torah as part of the oral Torah, and that therefore all of the ancients who wrote these prayers are in one way or another giving voice to that. But just to be clear, he does say prayer or Torah study, right? For him, these are both moments where this can happen. It's not just in prayer. Amud HaTefillah, the part of what we're talking about in the Besh, focuses on prayer, but he does mention Torah study as well. But this, I think, in some ways connects to Harvey's point. If it works for those, like, can't you just, like, when you're at a restaurant ordering, a salad, can you just look at the restaurant menu and have the same experience? Like, or if it's a mantra that was taught by Ram Dass or something, like, why does it have to be limited to these particularly Jewish pursuits? I don't have a great answer to that, but I think within the Jewish world, prayer and Torah are when we are specifically setting aside time to connect in some way with God, right? I mean, yes, of course, you could say at every moment we're supposed to do that, but those are two activities where we're really primed for that.
But if he believes the Torah was written by God or the word of God, then he kind of believes that God didn't want us to take even the Torah literally, that we're supposed to see it on the different levels of Sfirot or
right. Well, both the Torah and the prayer, yes. And this becomes one of the most deeply challenging parts of the Kabbalah, is and this is a very, very important point for the Besh, that every single element within the universe contains the whole, right? And that any single word has the potential to connect to an infinity of meanings, and therefore to bring you back to God. And that's something that the Baal Shem Tov will come to again and again and again. I will say, and this is, I posted something on Facebook. Joel, I think you commented on it. I could be wrong. In which I talk about the infinity of meanings and the infinity of possible interpretations, the infinity of them. And if you're because I think that this is the incredible promise and the very, very profound challenge of Kabbalistic readings of texts, which is what we've been talking about today, which is that any single word actually contains everything within it, and could be, has an infinity of interpretations and therefore possibilities. And so the promise of that is very obvious. The challenge is also very obvious, because how can anything mean anything if everything means everything? I feel like I'm being very obscure, but I'm not attempting
you're
to
saying
that.
it exactly right.
Okay, Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah, just to glom on to what you were saying earlier, there are actually some prayers in the liturgy that are constructed so as to create a trance-like fugue state when you say them and you repeat them, because of the sound of the Hebrew.
For sure. Yeah. Well, so actually, I'm glad you said that. So for sure, that is true. Like there's parts of that alphabetical acrostic that we read as part of the Yotzer prayer is one of those. And there's others where there's just a highly repetitive syllabic pattern. But what I want, my practical advice, and Brad, I'm a little bit circling back to your question. I know this is going to sound like a huge challenge for some of you, but you know, with concentration and repeated activities, we can accomplish amazing things. I think that the greatest gift you can give yourself as a Jewish prayer is to, sorry, I'm muting people just because I'm getting an echo. So no offense if you see yourself getting muted, would be to memorize as much of the prayers as you can, to memorize them. Now, we often think that, oh, if you memorize it, that means you're not really thinking about it, and that's not good. It's mindless. It's an incredibly powerful tool, I think, to enter into this dimension that the Baal Shem Tov is talking about. So if you can memorize the prayers of the Shema, or especially the prayers of the Amidah, you know, yes, it takes a while, but if you join in the weekly prayers, or you join in the Shabbos prayers, and you really make it a goal, over time, I don't know, some of you it'll take 3 months, some of you it'll take a year, 2 years, but if you're really deliberate about it and you practice it, it opens up so many possibilities to engage in what I think the Baal Shem Tov is talking about. Because then what happens is that you allow your brain to operate on two levels. You're engaging in the communal prayer with other people, and you're saying these words that bind you to the tradition and to our ancestors, but you're also freeing your mind to contemplate God on a deeper level that's beyond the sentence level. And I would say, if there's a single practical tool that I would say to people they should cultivate if they want to transform their experience of Jewish prayer, it would be to work towards memorizing as much of the prayer service as you can. And I know that's like in some ways that's a bummer. It's like, what? I mean, isn't there an easier answer? Yeah, there probably are easier answers, but you're not going to regret it. Lenny.
I just wanted to say that the power to me of this is he has such an incredible it makes so much epistemologic sense. It's so tight that when you see what he's saying, it's hard to imagine it could be another way. When
say
you
more.
Think about
say more.
I'm not sure how much, but he defines an entire world, and inside that world of understanding and knowledge, it makes total sense. It's not like you read him. It's not, when you talk about faith, it's not the cowardly lying saying, I do believe in ghosts, I do believe in ghosts. But in fact, it's part of an entire world. And as you get each of that holographic glimpses into that world, it kind of expands and makes sense all through that world that he defines.
Right.
I don't know if that made any sense at all.
No, I think it does make sense. Right. It is.
You make sense.
Yeah. I mean, he was a brilliant thinker. You know, he should not, the Baal Shem Tov should not be understood as just like some charismatic guru who like inspired people and got them excited. Like, he was a very profound thinker.
And I just mean, from a philosophical sense, it's very, very powerful stuff. It's not just somebody espousing some belief.
No, that's right. And it's interesting because, you know, for a long time, and this is a tangent, but it's worth saying, you often will hear the claim that Jews, like in Europe throughout the Middle Ages and throughout the for all of Western history, Jews didn't really have theology, and Christians did have theology. And the fact that Christians had theology is certainly true. From Augustine on, like, Christians were thinking and articulating theology in categories in very magnificent, beautiful, structured ways. but the truth is Jews also were doing theology, but it was never articulated in the same way, right? So you don't have a book from the Baal Shem Tov that says, seeing the all in every little piece, and then a long meditation on the concept that every piece contains the whole. But it's just these scattered teachings here and there. He was a very profound philosopher. I mean, to use a name that we don't usually, a word we don't usually use to describe him. Robbie, did you have a hand up?
Yes, and unfortunately, I have to take a friend to a doctor's appointment, so I've got to go. And so I think what I was going to say would throw everything. I wanted to see the relationship between this and Buber's I thou moment, and I think that's opening up a pretty big discussion. So I don't know if that's appropriate.
It is, it is. Right, maybe if you can bring that up at the next class. I mean, I do wonder whether there is an analogy where, like, you're encountering the text as a thou.
Yeah.
Right.
Another thou. Yeah. That's one way to look at it. My information has this as the last class. I didn't realize this is an ongoing thing.
No. There's all kinds of bad information out there, and probably I'm responsible for most of it. No, this class is continuing.
So
just on
every Monday at 12 o'clock?
No, it's every, what is it, second and fourth, or just every other Monday?
Every other Monday.
I'll go to the website.
Every other Monday.
I'm not a member of Sherry Torah, so I'm.
And bless you for taking your friend to the doctor.
Yeah, we're delighted you're here, and I hope your friend's okay.
Yeah, I belong to Shir Tikva. I'm Rabbi Stone's student, so.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, great.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Glad to have you with us.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess let me just let me reiterate what I said, and then we're going to wrap up here. I really, really, really want to ask you to take seriously and consider seriously what I've said about beginning to memorize parts of the prayers. It is, I think that, so we talk about the fact that the Baal Shem Tov, he doesn't say it this way, but understanding the prayers in a literal way, or trying to decode them on the sentence or word level, is obscuring the divine unity and perfection that he says they contain. Now, he doesn't talk about memorizing, so this is my little riff on it, but I have found memorization to be a tool that allows me to focus on the biggest picture while still engaging in communal prayer. And it's just a magnificent tool. So I would say, start with the Amidah and just do one line a week or one line a month, whatever it takes you. And over time, you'll be very happy about it. Anne?
I know that Hebrew wasn't the Baal Shem Tov's first language, but I have to assume that he wasn't struggling with the same questions of translation that we are when he was in the middle of prayer, that we kind of have to look at the words of the prayer on their most basic level, because we have to figure out what the prayer is saying before we can let go of that then and focus on it. So we have to know what the word means before we allow ourselves to forget that the word means something and to make it part of the greater whole. It's a we have it harder than the Baal Shem Tov, but it's hard.
Yeah. You listen, I think that I don't know if this is sound advice, but I'm just going to say it. I would say when you're in synagogue praying is not the time to think about what the prayers mean. I mean, that may sound totally counterintuitive for precisely the reasons we're talking about this. If you want prayer to be a higher experience of meditation and cleaving to the divine unity, and to be clear, I'm certainly not saying it is that for me, most of the time or even half of the time. But if you want that, whether you're translating it from the English or whether you're even if you were fluent in Hebrew and you're reading it on the sentence level, if you're doing that in shul, in my experience, that's very, beautiful. Prayers are beautiful no matter what. But you're relating it to it in the same way that you would relate to it in an academic class. And it's not bad. I mean, you know, it is what it is. But I just think that the time to study the prayers is during the week when you want to do some learning. Like, you know, so study the Ahava Rabbah, like on the sentence level and the literary level, and unpack it. And it's, you know, it contains many, many unbelievable deep parts if you study it on that level. But my advice would be do that outside. And then when you come in to pray, you know, try to open up to the approach of the Baal Shem Tov or the one that I've suggested as a way to get to what the Baal Shem Tov is proposing. But let me just zoom out and just review a couple of things very briefly, because we're going to keep building on this different knowledge of the Baal Shem Tov. So what the Baal Shem Tov is concerned with is the personal experience of the prayer or the learner, right? He's not satisfied with Kabbalah being a conceptual description of how God theoretically works in the world. He was very learned about that stuff, but that for him, if that's what you have, you don't have a religious life yet. What he cared about was how these things played out in the way that we see the world and the way we see our Judaism and the way we eventually will see the way we see everything around us. Okay, so that's one thing, the spiritual, psychological, emotional world of the individual and how to cleave to God through that. That was the concern of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, that was his focus. That's one. Another concept was the main one we spent most of our time talking about is that every word contains multiple layers. There's the surface meaning, right? So ahava, for example, in the ahava rabbah means abundant love. Okay, that's the level of the what he calls the level of the world. Okay, the olam. Then he talks about there's the level of the neshama, where I'm allowing whatever that word contains to resonate and to awaken in me my kind of highest awareness. Okay, if I read it right, if I see it if I allow the word to open up a window, right, and to have the divine light shine in it through my own creative capacities and my own open-mindedness, then I allow it to stir beyond abundant love, that specific meaning. I allow it to resonate with me by inspiring me to seek out God. And then the highest level is to see that within that experience, I can actually access the divine world, right? I can see within the word Ahava Rabbah, abundant love, not because of those particular words. I could have chosen any word in the whole prayer book, but I will be able to have an experience of the divine unity if I allow myself to. Okay. One of the other concepts we spoke briefly about was the idea that as a result of this, in any single, and this is something we're going to come back to again and again, in any single part of the world, and we're talking about words, but you know, eventually the same thing will become true of a tree or a door or whatever, but the whole is contained within the part. The whole is contained within the part. So that is, in this world of division, any one part of this world, whether you're talking about a person or a word, whatever it is, allows you to access the one, allows you to access unity. Okay. And then we also just talked about the fact that he believed that what his mission was, what Kabbalah was doing, what Hasidism was doing, was peeling back the world of illusion or the world of obfuscation to reveal the divine unity that binds all things together. But that's ultimately what this is really about. Yeah, I guess those are the main concepts we talked about today. Any closing comments before we delve? So let me ask you a practical, oh, sorry, Joel, and then I want to ask the group a question.
So I guess two things. One, did in his teachings, does he ever, instead of me trying to figure it all out because it's so complicated for us, if he says everything has hidden meanings, how come he just didn't teach what all the hidden meanings were in his writings? We put this whole thing right to bed, right?
Right.
And then I guess the other question was, the Mashiach told him that I'll come when your teachings spread out. Yet you said he never really did a lot of writing. So why, if someone told me my words were that powerful, I'd probably try to put down all my words if that's the objective.
Well, especially if the someone was the Messiah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would say, listen, my teachings are spreading, right? I mean, I didn't write them down, but my students did, and
doesn't matter.
And they are spreading around. Yeah. But to your first question, though, Joel, I think is actually really important. Now, I guess it's a little hard to see just at the beginning of our teaching of the Baal Shem Tov and in this particular work of the Amud HaTefillah. But I think he would say, well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I am trying to reveal, right? You see a prayer book and you think it's about, the splitting of the sea, or you think there's that prayer about, the second paragraph of the after the V'ahavta, you think it's about like reward and punishment, and you're all confused. You walk out of shul and you're like, what the hell did that mean? That wasn't inspiring. That's the world of obscurity. But now I, the Baal Shem Tov, am giving you the way to see past the obscurity. I'm teaching you the real meaning. Because some of these concepts are so new and unfamiliar, it may not feel like that. It may not, that may have gotten lost in what we're saying. But essentially, he's telling you, when you read the prayer book, what you're looking to do is to feel and experience cleaving to divine unity and oneness. And that's what prayer is about. It becomes more clear when you're reading, and again, what we're focusing on right now is a single long work as part of the Baal Shem Tov's other teachings. But if we just read a random Torah portion and read the Baal Shem Tov's teachings on the Torah portion, I think it would be clear that he is trying to take things that are obscure and reveal the hidden unity of God that's within them, right? He'll take a Torah verse that seems to be about X or someone's donkey or whatever, and he'll say, no, this is how you understand it, because really what it's pointing to is God's unity. Does that make sense? Kind of. Okay, so listen, I'm not sure how to approach this class, and I would like some advice from you. When we did Gates of Light, I shifted after a couple months in, because the book, the English translation of Gates of Light, was so impenetrable for people. And once the class convinced me of that, I shifted gears. And this book is, it's heavy duty, but it's not impenetrable. So one thing we could do is keep doing what we did here, and we just, reading little by little, and I pull out main themes. The other thing we do is I could say, okay, let's all read 20 pages by next time, and then we'll touch on some major points, which I think is probably a better way to do it, because it'll allow us to get through more of the text and then get beyond. So this class doesn't just become about Amud HaTefillah, which is the meditation on prayer, but we can also see some of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings on the Torah. Any thoughts about how you would prefer to have to approach the book? Lenny, and then Brad, and then Ann, and then Sarah.
Short. It's that if the Baal Shem Tov says that you need to understand each word, I would rather, if we got through one line of it, I'd rather do the next line the next class than say, this is what we have to cover. That's my opinion.
Okay, just crawl along as slowly as we have to go deep. Okay. Who did I say? Brad, and then Ann, and then Sarah.
Well, when you were just talking about I think the way you perceived how the teaching was going, starting with Gates of Light and that I use over and over again, I don't know what it means or why, but this idea of a blind man exploring the elephant. And if you explore this and you're not getting it, you'll eventually come on to the tail, which you can grab a hold of and feel all of its parts, and you'll have something. And that makes it worth it. And then later you can worry about getting a whole picture put together of what this elephant looks like.
Okay, so I think you're saying in a different way, you're supporting what Lenny said. We don't have to worry about covering too much. Let's just go slow, and we'll get there eventually.
I think for my part, trust me when I say that no matter what you want to do, I'm going to be able to get something out of it to make it more than worthwhile.
Okay, thank you.
I may not get everything you're saying, everything that there is in there, but not to worry.
Okay, great, thank you. And Sarah, Liz.
I'm on the other side. I would like, because I did come to this class having read about 20 pages, the intro and then into it. And so then when we started out, I felt grounded. I felt like, oh, I've read these words, and it turns out that I read them completely upside down from the way that you taught it. So that is humbling. But I would rather come in having read the same thing that everybody else has read, so that we can have something to say.
Okay, well, maybe there's a way of doing both things. But in other words, maybe we can read to page X, but then we'll go back over it carefully. And anyway, I have to think about it. Sarah and then Liz.
Anne already said a bit of what I wanted to say too. I agree with her. I'd like to come to class better prepared. That the common words that you're talking about aren't always having to be defined, because we're hung up on one word and moving to the next. I'd like to have done a little bit of preparation so I'm more familiar, and maybe one of these days we can get people to actually raise their hands with questions.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Liz and then Cheryl, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
I like that you lead the class with specific points, because when I read things, I may miss them. I don't have the book, but I'm speaking from experience about reading the really deep spiritual kind of information that would be in the pillar of prayer. Okay. So, and that being said, I like that you bring the points. If there was a reading assignment and you had some specific notes about what those things meant, might be more helpful for us to form questions. That would be the only, that'd be a lot on you.
Okay.
And I want to ask if I can summarize what I understood from today's class very briefly in like 30 seconds. Is that cool?
I'm sorry. You know what? I'm not sorry, only because we're already 25 minutes past when I wanted to end, and I just tried to do a summary. You can email me if you want. Okay. Cheryl, last word.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you're muted.
There I am. I unmuted. I completely agree with Lenny, and he said it better than I was going to say. As far as I'm concerned, I can spend the whole rest of my life reading this book. And I would say that that's not incompatible with people reading, section at a time and bringing in their questions.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I just,
Okay.
I don't see why reading ahead or having sort of an assignment means we can't also go very slowly through
Right.
it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Okay, so I think what I'm going to say is, and for those of you who already did a chunk of reading, this might mean that you have nothing to do for the next class, but we're as a way of creating a structure that we're going to use, we are going to try to thread the needle. So we're going to, for next time, I want people to read chapter 1. And so if you already read, it sounds like Sarah or Anne may have already done that. But read chapter 1, all of chapter 1, and then, bring any questions you have, and we'll try to go into great depth not over every page, but we'll go into depth on parts that I think are most representative of core elements of his teaching. Okay. That's what I got. Sarah Sturt's last comment, but brief.
What's the name of the book again?
Pillar of Prayer.
It's called Pillar of Prayer. Whoops, the Pillar of Prayer, and it's the name. So there's, let's see, Menachem Kallus, Kallus. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Michael Sasnow has made a recommendation. You should look at it in the comments. And anybody who wants to see the YouTube that Rabbi put up, you probably ought to make a copy of the link now because it's going to disappear.
Where?
Yeah, I put in the chat room the link to the Rachel Elior lecture, which is called Rethinking Jewish Mysticism, for those who are interested.
Oh,
And Michael suggested a Facebook group for the class, which I think could actually be a really useful tool. So I don't know if somebody wants to help organize that, but thank you everybody so much. Take care. Please do get the book. Let me know if you need financial help. Bye.
Okay.